Shalom, welcome to Rob on the Rock. I'm Rob Vanoff, and for this week's Torah portion, which is Tavo, we're going to look at an ancient manuscript from Qumran, from Cave 4, that has just this fragment from Deuteronomy 26, 1 through 4. You see the fragment here in the black and white image, and then an English translation here. I believe this is the ESV, and we're going to look at that, and we're going to compare it with a beautiful 13th century Spanish Tanakh called the Madrid Codex, and we're going to read from this beautiful manuscript as well. But let's start by looking at the English here. So the English text of Deuteronomy 26, 1 through 4, when you come into the land that Adonai your God is giving you for an inheritance, and have taken possession of it and live in it, you shall take some of the first of all the fruit of the ground, which you harvest from your land that Adonai your God is giving you, and you shall put it in a basket, and you shall go to the place that Adonai your God will choose to make his name to dwell there. And you shall go to the priest who is in office at that time and say to him, I declare today to Adonai your God that I have come into the land that Adonai swore to our fathers to give us. Then the priest shall take the basket from your hand and set it down before the altar of Adonai your God. So we're just going to focus on this passage, and you can see where I have some bold. Here, I'll highlight that with some blue just to make it pop a little more. Your God is giving of the ground with the end of the word fruit in a basket, and you shall go to the end of the word there, and you shall go to the priest, to Adonai your God, and the priest shall take the. So these underlined sections correspond, I'll go to yellow here, to the lines we see here. So we're going to take some time to go line by line and learn a little bit about the Hebrew used here. One of the features of this manuscript is the paleo-Hebrew stylized Tetragrammaton here, which you can see. I'll write right underneath. There's our yod. Now, these, when I say stylized, is because these the scribe here is not using real accurate paleo-Hebrew. My guess, just by looking at the way the scribe wrote the Tetragrammaton in paleo-Hebrew, is that he's not trained in paleo-Hebrew as a script. Rather, he just knows these few letters, and so it's symbolic for him. It's not that he actually knows the paleo-Hebrew alphabet, but we'll get to that. Let's now that we've read it in English and we've seen what this fragment looks like, you see it's sadly highly damaged. We only have a section of it. Was it from the entire roll of Deuteronomy? We don't know. This is all we know for sure, and I think there's some other fragments that have been identified with it. Here is the Madrid Codex. I believe it's 13th century, maybe 14th century. Spanish Jewish scribes. So these are not traditional Masoretic scribes, but they are copying with the ideology of Masoretic tradition. And so I'm going to zoom. You can see the beautiful three columns. You can see how later someone in the Catholic tradition got a hold of this book, and they wrote in red, and they wrote chapter numbers, and they wrote Deuteronomy in Latin above the top of the page, chapter 24, you see that, chapter 26. So I'm just going to zoom in here, and I'm going to go in quite a bit so we can see it. A lot of beautiful Masoretic notes preserved in the margins. So here you go. See, the red does not come from the Jewish scribe, obviously, here. I wonder if I can go one more in. Yeah, that's 300%. Okay, that'll work. So here we go. And it says, V'chaya כי תבוא אל הארץ, אשר אדוני אלוהיך נותן לך, נחלה. וירשת, וישבת בה. ולקחת מראשית כל פרי האדמה, אשר תביא מארצך, אשר אדוני אלוהיך נותן לך. ושמת ותנה, והלכת אל המקום אשר יבחר אדוני אלוהיך לשכן שמו שם. ובאת אל הכהן אשר יחיה בימים ההם, ואמרת אליו, הגדתי היום לאדוני אלוהיך, כי באתי אל הארץ אשר נשבע אדוני לאבותינו, לתת לנו. ולקח הכהן התנה מידך, והניחו לפני מזבח אדוני אלוהיך. So there's our passage in English, or in Hebrew rather, of which we already read the English translation. And what I want to do is compare now. Now here, of course, this is full of the Masoretic vocalizations of Deuteronomy 26, 1 through 4. I'm going to have this here, but I'm going to bring our manuscript from Qumran here. And I'm just going to go little by little. So the first line that we're going to look at is this top bit here. And what we see is it's a kaf and a hey. And then a nun, vav, tav, and then probably a nun sofit. And what this is going to be is Elohecha, the Lord your God is giving you. And so presumably what we would have seen here is Aleph, Lamed, Vav, Hey, and then a Yod, which would look, if we saw this in a Masoretic text, it's Elohecha like this, and then Noten with just a cholam like that. So that's what our Masoretic, Elohecha, the Lord your God, is giving. And what this means then is that this particular text would add the vav here, and I'll show you why I think that is, even though it's broken off here, the hey, and then another vav. So that these three letters then would be additional letters using the vav and the hey as a vowel sound, not as part of necessary spelling. You can see how in the Masoretic tradition we have Elohecha, where the word ends with a kaf sofit. What we see in Qumran, it does not end in a kaf sofit, it ends in a kaf with a hey. Do you see that? So that is one difference here in this line. And this corresponds, as we saw in our translation below, to Adonai your God is giving, to that part right here. So how do we know this is the text? Well, we continue on. So what I'm going to do, I'll put those, we'll come back and mark those later. Let's go back to a yellow. Is we see a yod here, the next line. Then we see a hey, another aleph, a dalet, a mem, and another hey. And this is going to be from pri ha'adama, from the fruit of the ground. So the Masoretic would be pei, resh, yod, the same exact spelling. Hey, aleph, dalet, mem, hey. Pri ha'adama, fruit of the ground. And then we see part of an aleph right here. And that is going to be, that's going to correspond here to fruit of the ground, which, that aleph is part of the asher, which is right there, which. So as we look each line, and we know that these are all from Deuteronomy 26, we know that's got to be what this segment is from. And as we continue, we see it just gets more and more confirmed. we see a tet here, nun, and an aleph. A tene. Tene is the word for basket. And then a vav. Ve. He. Halach. Ta. El. Vehalakta el. So if I were to write that in a Masoretic form, it would be like tet, nun, aleph, tene, va, vehalakta. But what we're going to see is that the Masoretic ends this way, vehalakta el, like this. And this corresponds to in a basket, and you shall go to the place. But what we're seeing is you shall go. In a basket, and you shall go. But again, just like in the other line, we're seeing additional. Remember up here, we saw that this hey is additional, this vav is additional. We see another use of a hey as a vowel, the halakta. In the traditional text of the Masoretic scribes, it's just 5 letters, vav, hey, lamed, kaf, tav. Vehalachta, and you will go. But what we see in the Qumran text is that added hey. So Elohecha, we use that hey to say vehalachta. They add the hey to communicate a vowel, a pronunciation. It doesn't change the name of or it doesn't change the meaning of the word, but it changes its visual representation is all. Okay, so I'm gonna erase that because I wrote on top of the other text there. So let's continue on here. So then we see what looks like a hey. So it's like what came before that. Then vav, bet, tav, another hey. Aleph lamed, another hey. Kaf, vav, hey, and then a nun sofit. So this is, and you will come. If I were to write this in standard block, vav, bet, tav, hey, and then el, and then hakohen. And you will go to the Kohen. But what's interesting is this is not what the Masoretic text reads precisely. The Masoretic text says vav, oops, let me make it a little smaller, bet, and then aleph here, because the verb lavo, to go, has an aleph, and it's vata, like that. There's no hey at the end. So the difference here is in 2 places. There's an aleph missing in the Qumran text, and there's an added hey in the Qumran text. El is fine too, but the Kohen in the Masoretic text, is just spelled like this. There's no vav. It's a holem instead. So again, like we're seeing a consistent pattern here. We're seeing an added vav, an added hey again. So now we go back and we see this letter's added, this letter's added. And it turns out that this letter, this hey in the far right, is also not present in the Masoretic text, because it should be the word sham, there. So the Masoretic text has shin, mem sofit here, sham, there, cause his name to dwell there. It is likely that, because sometimes shama, the hey, there's what we call a locative hey at the end, and it was probably, the Qumran text probably had shin, mem, hey, shama. So that hey then is another letter that is sets this text apart from the Masoretic. Okay, so we need to continue on here. I'm going to erase what I had from the Masoretic here. And then we have Lamed, Pei, Nun, Yod. That's Lifnei. Oops, I need to make this so you can read it. Lifnei. And then we have our Tetragrammaton. So this is a very quickly written Tetragrammaton, but it's technically the more formal and careful Paleo-Hebrew would not make the letters this way. It would make the Yod much more like this. Even if it was more at an angle, that's fine. But this scribe, I don't think knows the alphabet very well. It would be more like this. The Vav, he does a pretty good Vav, but his Heys are very sloppy. And I'll erase, I don't think I did a horrible job of tracing over. Let's zoom in on that. And I'll point out to you little by little why I think it's sloppy. If we look at his Yod, what the Yod should be, it is this. But do you see how he does this and then two strokes? I think that's a little sloppy. And the Hey is, if you could give him some slack on that Yod, but look at this Hey. The vertical line goes way too tall, and it even crosses over. So it's almost like this that he's making it. And that's not, most of the time the Hey we see is more like this, without that cross at the top. And he does that twice. It's the Vav looks pretty good. The Vav, I'm not going to give him too much grief about the Vav, but his Heys, you can see, are not even consistent. It's like a vertical line crossed all the way over, and then here, like this. So you could say, well, he's writing really quickly, but in my view, this is symbolic use of the Paleo-Hebrew. He's not a Paleo-Hebrew artist or calligrapher. His Hebrew is not even that great, if you ask me. But so that would be our Yod, Hey, Vav, Hey, and then Elohecha. Here's our Aleph, Lamed, Vav, Hey, and then of course this is broken off, but there's probably Yod, Kaf, and then a Hey again, Elohecha. Let me do that last bit again. Elohecha is probably what's here, broken off, because that's the text, the Lord your God. And if so, then again, this Hey at the end would be added, but indeed this Vav is added. What we're also going to see is that the Lifnei here in our lower right corner is not in the Masoretic text at all. The Masoretic text here has Lamed as a preposition right on top, right added to the Tetragrammaton. I'll show you that. Ladonai, not Lifnei Adonai. So if we go back to our Madrid Codex, and I'll show you where that is. Let's see here. It says, Higadti Hayom, right here, Ladonai Elohecha, Ladonai Elohecha. So where the Masoretic text has Ladonai Elohecha, the Qumran text says Lifnei Adonai Elohecha, completely new word added. Now they're both prepositions. Lifnei means before. It can mean spatially or temporally. Here is probably spatially is what's intended. So that's a different, a big difference. And so if I go back over and trace those now, we've got Lamed, we've got Lifnei, then we have our kind of what I'm thinking of a sloppy Tetragrammaton. And then we have the beginning of Elohecha. So I'll go ahead and write what I'm thinking that would roughly look like there. And then to mark the additions, I'm going to mark that Vav, of course, and the speculation of that kaf, or the hey at the end. But all three of these letters, I have to mark lifnei, because as we saw in the Masoretic Text, the lamed goes right attached as one word, ladonai. So this is dated to the 1st century, I think, or Herodian. So it could be 1st century BC, maybe a little into the 1st century Common Era. And that takes us to our very last line. And our very last line here we see lamed. The lameds are easy to pick out. Kuf, chet, lakach, and then hey. Remember, the heys here do not look like nun sofit. The heys do not look like the heys we were used to in our day and age. And then we have aleph, et, here's our et. And then we have another hey, et ha something. Well, guess what? Lakach hakohen et. That corresponds to this last bit here. The priest shall take the basket. Well, guess what? Lakach is our verb to take. Hakohen, that's the subject of the verb. Lakach hakohen. This would look in Masoretic Hebrew, would just spell it like this. Again, with just the cholam. I can show you from our text here. It says, ve lakach. See that? Ve lamed kaf, or lamed kuf chet hakohen. See how there's no vav? Hey, kaf, cholam, for the O sound, hey, and then a nun sofit. And then it says, hatene, the priest shall take the basket. Well, guess what? No definite definite direct object marker. But what we see here is the et. That's not in T. There is no et there in the Masoretic tradition. So if we zoom back out then and look at the whole deal, see if I can get it all on the screen here. What we see are a few places. Let me get rid of this up here. So we have an added hey here, added vav here. We have an added hey here. We have a missing aleph. There should be an aleph here. Added hey, added vav for hakohen. This hey was added. This is from Shema. The word there. This whole word is added. Fnei, which should be ladonai. It's lifnei Adonai. Elohecha, there's a vav. Hakohen, that vav is added. And this whole word, et, is added. So, is there any significant meaning difference? I would say no. No significant meaning difference. Of course, we could say, too, that this text is distinguished in that the Tetragrammaton is represented in an ideological script other than the rest of the text. So overall, we don't have any reason to believe that this text had a different meaning in any instance than our Masoretic tradition. But we see variation that is very curious. We see the use of the letter hey and the use of the letter vav all over as vowels. They don't add meaning. They don't change meaning. All it is variant spellings, what we call full spellings, that help a person know how to pronounce words. But we do see the pnei added here, these three, and then the et added. So overall, the meaning is the same for Deuteronomy 26, 1 through 4, from this manuscript from Cave 4, from the Herodian era, as it is in the Masoretic text. However, we have the issue of scribal convention. And what we see time and again is that the Masoretic scribes are very, very conservative. And when I say conservative, it means their desire is to protect the received text, to protect it letter by letter, to not add a letter, to not subtract a letter. And if they have a suggestion of a different spelling, in the later Masoretic products, we see those notes put in the margins. They don't go into the text itself and modify it. Whereas the scribe here at Qumran felt no constraint to add letters. And in the case of the missing aleph, here at bata, in this word right here, there's a missing aleph at Qumran. I think that was just a scribal error, but we also know that that is a silent aleph, and it is more just visually missing. But orally, if you're just listening, you wouldn't hear that the aleph is missing. So again, that would be another point that this is a text that is for somebody to practice pronouncing the text and saying it out loud. Saying it out loud is what mattered. And the person listening wouldn't really hear a difference, except instead of l'Adonai, they'd hear lifnei Adonai, and they would hear the et, hakohen, lakach hakohen et hatene, rather than lakach hakohen hatene. One thing we don't know from Qumran, final point, is that when they came to the Tetragrammaton, which here they convey with a symbolic paleo-Hebrew script, we don't know how they would pronounce it. We don't know if they would say Adonai every time, or if they would say Hashem, or what. What we do know is that the scribes had some sort of constraint, some sort of compulsion, probably from maybe that they had learned or of their own piety, an effort of piety, is to set the four-letter name of God apart from the rest of the text visually. And from what we know from later scribes and even early Targumim and Greek translations as well, we know that that visual differentiation, that setting it apart visually like we see here, corresponded to an oral differentiation as well. In other words, if they wrote it differently, they would also speak it differently. So that's it for ancient manuscripts for Parashat Ki Tavo. Shalom.